Hi, I'm Madeline Pires. Today I'd like to share with you my most recent commissioned painting. It's actually a watercolour for a change, not an oil painting, and it was commissioned by someone who liked my interweaving drawings and watercolours, and he wanted something similar to express in an abstract sort of way the part of the Gospel of Luke which talks about the road to Emmaus in Luke 24. So this part of the Bible is where the resurrected Messiah appears to some disciples who were walking along the road out of Jerusalem towards a place called Emmaus. And they were walking along, and they met this person who they didn't recognize, and he began to explain to them from the Scriptures all of the things concerning himself, concerning the Messiah, beginning at Moses and all the prophets. So with all this in mind, I started a drawing which begins at a certain point and works its way out. For this one, I felt that the golden section composition lines were important, and you can see those here. As I was drawing, which was a very intuitive process, I felt similar to when I'm working on a jigsaw puzzle. I'm sure you're familiar with when you're trying to see where the pieces go with an empty space, and it was a bit like that when I was doing the drawing. It was like I was sort of being guided to go to a particular place or in a particular direction, and I just had to sort of trust and have faith in the whole process of it, where I was not just using my brain but using my heart as a more intuitive process. And it sort of ties in with that Bible verse also in Luke 24. If you read that chapter, it talks about Jesus being, he says, "You're so slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken." And I feel like it's the same sort of process in my art, in my art drawing these days. It's more of using the eyes of my heart as well as my physical eyes. Okay, so when I was drawing, I also wrote down the keywords that came to my mind when I was thinking, and just sort of the whole process of it. So you can see all my keywords here. So when I sent this to the person who had commissioned this painting, he said the following: "The contrast between the circles and the pattern is particularly striking. It speaks to me of the disciples moving from a limited and restricted understanding to something which is growing, realigning," and the other words, the other keywords. He also said that he'd been working with some students on the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 8, and one scholar commented, "Paul distinguishes between knowing as in the verb, as a process that is continuous and ever learning, and knowledge, the noun gnosis, as something denoting something static or completed." So there's this distinguishing between knowing as the verb and knowledge as the noun. And there's this whole idea in this artwork of the process of understanding, the process of knowing, the action of knowing. And we really felt that this artwork should symbolize all of this emerging from the Scriptures, and perhaps even the inclusion of some Hebrew words from which this new knowing has evolved. So to start the painting, I got a lovely big piece of A2 watercolour paper and did a wash of a semi-landscape in the tones that the commissioner wanted. It was important to have an idea of a vanishing point, so that's that point just there. And yes, I felt like it was important so it could represent, the road to Emmaus, and a pathway which could go into the distance. And it was important that there was some sort of earth or land, so you can get the idea of mountains there. So the idea of earth or a land, some sort of landscape, earthiness, which was going into somewhere that seemed a bit more spiritual. Something, this cloudy area over here that is, it seems tangible but not physical, if you know what I mean. I wanted to create a context where the humanity of the disciples and the supernatural qualities of the Messiah are brought together as a fresh understanding and process of discovery. And then I drew my drawing over top, my original drawing, but bigger of course, keeping the golden section dimensions. And then I masked out the lines and painted a new layer over top to sort of, you know, just to sort of define some areas and just let it sort of emerge, you know. And I wanted to keep some areas built up and others lighter, and to really get that sort of layered effect using the same kind of movements that I'd used to do the drawing. And when I took off the masking from the interweaving lines, I wanted the abstract patterns to connect to the background and not be outlined too much. And you'll see that there are like little budding areas, you know, where they seem to be sort of diffusing into the landscape, into the atmosphere, into the sky. And those sort of blooming bits are supposed to sort of represent, you know, like how a flower sort of opens up to absorb the sunlight, welcomes it in. I think to me that sort of represents the way that we can open up our hearts to receive wisdom from God, to open up our hearts and, you know, soften our hearts and just be open to the teaching. So we had discussed the possibility of including Hebrew words from the Luke 24 passage. And at this point, when I'd finished most of the painting, it became clear where they should go within the pattern. Many of you might know that the Gospel of Luke was written in Greek, but a translation into Hebrew would make the connection with the Hebrew Bible being interpreted by Jesus, and they would have spoken in Aramaic. So here I've put verse 27, which means, I'll just say it, then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And then over here we put verse 32. So I'll try and get a bit closer there. Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us? And this seems to run more centrally through the painting, on that sort of main bit there that goes all the way up, and it sort of expresses what is occurring through the incident on the road. So thank you so much for watching this video about He Unravels the Scriptures. It was just an absolute pleasure and delight to work on this painting and to just bring it into existence. A lot of thought went into it as well, both from myself and from the person who commissioned it, and it was a wonderful collaboration. So thank you so much for watching, and do look out for other videos.